What's it going to be then, eh? There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie and Dim. Dim being really dim. And we sat in the Corova milk bar, making up our orthodox what to do with the evening. A flip, dark, chill winter bastard, though dry. The Corova milk bar was a Milk Plus mess store, and you may, my brothers, have forgotten what these mess stores were like. Things changing so scorry these days, and nobody very quick to remember. Newspapers not being read much neither. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no licence for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new vestiges which they used to put into the old Mollico. So you could peat it with Velocet or Synthimesk or Drencrom or one or two other vestiges which would give you a nice, quiet horror show 15 minutes, admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe, with lights bursting all over your mozg. Or you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and this would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20-to-1. And that was what we were peating this evening I'm starting off the story with. Our pockets were full of deng, so there was no real need, from the point of view of crasting any more pretty Polly, to tolchock some old veck in an alley and vidi him swim in his blood while we counted the takings and divided by 4, nor to do the ultra-violent on some shivering, starry, grey-haired pizza in a shop and go smecking off with the till's guts. But as they say, money isn't everything. The 4 of us were dressed in the height of fashion, which in those days was a pair of black, very tight tights with the old jelly mould, as we called it, fitting on the crotch underneath the tights. This being to protect, and also a sort of a design you could vidi clear enough in a certain light, so that I had one in the shape of a spider, Pete had a ruka, a hand, that is. Georgie had a very fancy one of a flower, and poor old Dim had a very hound and horny one of a clown's litzo, a face, that is. Dim not ever having much of an idea of things, and being, beyond all shadow of a doubt in Thomas, the dimmest of we 4. Then we wore waisty jackets without lapels, but with these very big built-up shoulders, pletchos we called them, which were a kind of a mockery of having real shoulders like that. Then, my brothers, we had these off-white cravats which looked like whipped-up kartoffel or spud, with a sort of a design made on it with a fork. We wore our hair not too long, and we had flip horror show boots for kicking. What's it going to be then, eh? There were 3 devotchkas sitting at the counter all together, but there were 4 of us Malchiks, and it was usually like one for all and all for one. These sharps were dressed in the height of fashion too, with purple and green and orange wigs on their gullivers, each one not costing less than 3 or 4 weeks of those sharps' wages, I should reckon, and make-up to match, rainbows round the glasses, that is, and the rot painted very wide. Then they had long black very straight dresses, and on the groody part of them they had little badges of like silver with different Malchiks' names on them, Joe and Mike and such like. These were supposed to be the names of the different Malchiks they'd spatted with before they were 14. They kept looking our way, and I nearly felt like saying the 3 of us, out of the corner of my rot that is, should go off for a bit of poll and leave poor old Dim behind, because it would be just a matter of coupetting Dim a demi-litre of white, but this time with a dollop of Synthimesk in it. But that wouldn't really have been playing like the game. Dim was very, very ugly, and like his name, but he was a horror show filthy fighter and very handy with the boots. What's it going to be then, eh? The Cheloviek sitting next to me, there being this long, big, plushy seat that ran round 3 walls, was well away with his glasses glazed and sort of burbling slovos like Aristotle, wishy-washy worked, outing, cyclamen, get forficulate, smartish. He was in the land, all right, well away, in orbit. And I knew what it was like, having tried it like everybody else had done. But at this time, I'd got to thinking it was a cowardly sort of a vestige, my brothers. You'd lay there after you'd drunk the old Mollico, and then you'd get the messel that everything all around you was sort of in the past. You could vidi it all right, all of it, very clear. Tables, the stereo, the lights, the sharps and the Malchiks. But it was like some vesture that used to be there, but was not there not no more. And you were sort of hypnotised by your boot or shoe or a fingernail, as it might be. And at the same time, you were sort of picked up by the old scruff and shook like you might be a cat. You got shook and shook till there was nothing left. You lost your name and your body and yourself, and you just didn't care. And you waited till your boot or your fingernail got yellow, then yellower and yellower all the time. Then the light started cracking like atomics, and the boot or fingernail, or as it might be, a bit of dirt on your trouser bottom, turned into a big mess, though, bigger than the whole world. And you were just going to get introduced to old Bog or God when it was all over. You came back to here and now, whimpering sort of, with your rot all squared up for a boo-oo-oo. Now that's very nice, but very cowardly. You were not put on this earth just to get in touch with God. That sort of thing could sap all the strength and the goodness out of a Chilovnik. What's it going to be then, eh? The stereo was on, and you got the idea that the singer's golos was moving from one part of the bar to another, flying up to the ceiling and then swooping down again and whizzing from wall to wall. It was Bertie Lasky rasping a real starry oldie called You Blister My Paint. One of the three petitzers at the counter, the one with the green wig, kept pushing her belly out and pulling it in time to what they call the music. I could feel the knives in the old Moloko starting to prick, and now I was ready for a bit of 20-1. So I yelped, out, 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 like a doggy. And then I cracked this Vec who was sitting next to me and well away and burbling, a horror show crack on the Uko Warrior roll. But he didn't feel it, and went on with his telephonic hardware, and when the far culule gets rub-a-dub-dub. He'd feel it all right when he came to, out of the land. Where out? Said Georgie. Oh, just to keep walking, I said, and viddy what turns up, oh my little brothers. So we scattered out into the big winter notchy and walked down Margarita Boulevard and then turned into Boothby Avenue, and there we found what we were pretty well looking for, a Malenki jest to start off the evening with. There was a doddery, starry, schoolmaster-type Vec, glasses on and his rot open to the cold, notchy air. He had books under his arm and a crappy umbrella, and was coming round the corner from the public biblio, which not many ludies used those days. You never really saw many of the older bourgeois type out after nightfall those days, what with a shortage of police and we fine young mal-chicky-wicks about, and this prof-type Cholovyek was the only one walking in the whole of the street. So we gooded up to him, very polite, and I said, "Pardon me, brother." He looked a malenky bit poogly when he vidded the four of us like that, coming up so quiet and polite and smiling, but he said, "Yes, what is it?" in a very loud teacher-type golos, as if he was trying to show us he wasn't poogly. I said, "I see you have books under your arm, brother. It is indeed a rare pleasure these days to come across somebody that still reads, brother." "Oh," he said, all shaky. "Is it? Oh, I see." And he kept looking from one to the other of we four, finding himself now like in the middle of a very smiling and polite square. "Yes," I said, "it would interest me greatly, brother, if you would kindly allow me to see what books those are that you have under your arm. I like nothing better in this world than a good clean book, brother." "Clean," he said. "Clean, eh?" And then Pete scvatted those three books from him and handed them round real scorry. Being three, we all had one each to viddy at, except for Dim. The one I had was called Elementary Crystallography, so I opened it up and said, "Excellent, really first class," keeping turning the pages. Then I said, in a very shocked type golos, "But what is this here? What is this filthy slovo? I blush to look at this word. You disappoint me, brother, you do, really." "But," he cried, but. "Now," said Georgie, "here is what I should call real dirt. There's one slovo beginning with an F and another with a C." He had a book called The Miracle of the Snowflake. "Oh," said poor old Dim, smotting over Pete's shoulder and going too far like he always did. "It says here what he done to her, and there's a picture and all. Why," he said, "you're nothing but a filthy-minded old skite bird." "An old man of your age, brother," I said, and I started to rip up the book I'd got, and the others did the same with the ones they had, Dim and Pete doing a tug-of-war with the rhombohedral system. The starry prof type began to creech. "But those are not mine. Those are the property of the municipality. This is sheer wantonness and vandal work," or some such slovos. And he tried to sort of wrest the books back off us, which was like pathetic. "You deserve to be taught a lesson, brother," I said. "That you do." This crystal book I had was very tough bound and hard to rest to bits, being real starry and made in days when things were made to last like. But I managed to rip the pages up and chuck them in handfuls of like snowflakes, though big, all over this creaking old Vec, and then the others did the same with hers, old Dim just dancing about like the clown he was. "There you are," said Pete. "There's the mackerel of the cornflake for you, you dirty reader of filth and nastiness." "You naughty old Vec, you," I said, and then we began to filly about with him. Pete held his rookers, and Georgie sort of hooked his rot wide open for him, and Dim yanked out his false zoobies, upper and lower. He threw these down on the pavement, and then I treated them to the old boot crush, though they were hard bastards, like being made of some new horror show plastic stuff. The old Vec began to make sort of chumbling shooms. Woof, woof, woof. So Georgie let go of holding his goobers apart and just let him have one in the toothless rot with his ringy fist, and that made the old Vec start moaning a lot then. Then out comes the blood, my brothers, real beautiful. So all we did then was to pull his outer platties off, stripping him down to his vest and long underpants. Very starry. Dim smacked his head off near. And then Pete kicks him lovely in his pot, and we let him go. He went sort of staggering off, not having been too hard of a toll shock, really, going, "Oh, oh, oh," not knowing where or what was what, really, and we had a snigger at him and then riffle through his pockets. Dim dancing round with his crappy umbrella meanwhile, but there wasn't much in them. There were a few starry letters, some of them dating right back to 1960, with "My dearest, dearest" in them, and all that chapuka, and a key ring, and a starry, leaky pen. Old Dim gave up his umbrella dance, and of course had to start reading one of the letters out loud, like to show the empty street he could read. "My darling one," he recited in this very high-type goloss, "I shall be thinking of you while you are away, and hope you will remember to wrap up warm when you go out at night." Then he let out a very shumnish smack, "Woo, woo, woo," pretending to start wiping his yarmer with it. "All right," I said, "let it go, my brothers." In the trousers of this starry Vec there was only a malenky bit of cutter, money that is, not more than 3 gollies. So we gave all his messy little coin the scatter treatment, it being hen comb to the amount of pretty polly we had on us already. Then we smashed the umbrella and razzed his platties and gave them to the blowing winds, my brothers, and then we'd finished with the starry teacher-type Vec. We hadn't done much, I know, but that was only like the start of the evening, and I make no happy polyloggies to thee or thine for that. The knives in the Milk Plus were stabbing away nice and horror show now. The next thing was to do the Sammy Act, which was one way to unload some of our cutter, so we'd have more of an incentive like for some shop crusting, as well as it being a way of buying an alibi in advance. So we went into the Duke of New York on Amis Avenue, and sure enough in the snug there were 3 or 4 old babuchkas peating their blackened suds on S.A., state aid, that is. Now, we were the very good malchicks, smiling good even song to one and all, though these wrinkled old lighters started to get all shook, their venial rookers all trembling round their glasses and making the suds spill on the table. "Leave us be, lads," said one of them, her face all mappy with being 1,000 years old. "We're only poor old women." But we just made with the zoobies, flash, 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 sat down, rang the bell, and waited for the boy to come. When he came, all nervous and rubbing his rookers on his grassy apron, we ordered us 4 veterans, a veteran being rum and cherry brandy mixed, which was popular just then, some liking a dash of lime in it, with that being the Canadian variation. Then I said to the boy, "Give these poor old babuchkas over there a nourishing something, large Scotchman all round and something to take away." And I poured my pocket of deng all over the table, and the other 3 did likewise, oh my brothers. So double fire goals were brought in for the scared starry lighters, and they knew not what to do or say. One of them got out, "Thanks, lads," but you could see they thought there was something dirty-like coming. Anyway, they were each given a bottle of Yank General, cognac, that is, to take away, and I gave money for them to be delivered each a dozen of blackened suds that following morning, they to leave their stinking old China's addresses at the counter. Then with the cutter that was left over, we did purchase, my brothers, all the meat pies, pretzels, cheese snacks, crisps and choc bars in that mesto, and those 2 were for the old sharps. Then we said, "Back in a minuta," and the old petitzers were still saying, "Thanks, lads," and "God bless you, boys," and we were going out without 1 cent of cutter in our carmans. "Makes you feel real dobby, that does," said Pete. You could video that poor old Dim the Dim didn't quite pony all that, but he said nothing for fear of being called gloopy and a domeless wonder boy. Well, we went off now round the corner to Atley Avenue, and there was this sweets and cancers shop still open. We'd left them alone near 3 months now, and the old district had been very quiet on the whole, so the armed millicents or Ros patrols weren't round there much, being more north of the river these days. We put our maskies on. New jobs these were, real horror show. Wonderfully done, really. They were like faces of historical personalities. They gave you the names when you bought. And I had Disraeli, Pete had Elvis Presley, Georgie had Henry VIII, and poor old Dim had a poet Vec called P.B. Shelley. They were a real like disguise, hair and all, and they were some very special plastic vests, so you could roll it up when you're done with it and hide it in your boot. Then 3 of us went in, Pete keeping Chasser without, not that there was anything to worry about out there. As soon as we launched on the shop, we went for Slouse, who ran it, a big port wine jelly of a Vec, who vidded at once what was coming and made straight for the inside where the telephone was and perhaps his well-oiled pushka, complete with 6 dirty rounds. Dim was round that corner, scotty as a bird, sending packets of snouty flying and cracking over a big cutout, showing her sharp with all her zoobies going flash at the customers and her grudies near hanging out to advertise some new brand of cancers. What you could video then was a sort of a big ball rolling into the inside of the shop behind the curtain, this being old Dim and Slouse sort of locked in a death struggle. Then you could Sloushy panting and snoring and kicking behind the curtain, and vestiges falling over and swearing, and then glass going smash, smash, smash. Mother Slouse, the wife, was sort of froze behind the counter. We could tell she would screech murder, given one chance, so I was round that counter very scorry and had a hold of her, and a horror show big lump she was too, all nuking of scent and with flip-flop big bobbing grudies on her. I'd got my rook around her rot to stop her belting out death and destruction to the 4 winds of heaven, but this lady doggy gave me a large foul big bite on it, and it was me that did the creeching, and then she opened up beautiful with a flip yell for the Millicents. Well, then she had to be tall-chocked proper with one of the weights for the scales, and then a fair tap with a crowbar they had for opening cases, and that brought the red out like an old friend. So we had her down on the floor and a rip of her platties for fun and a gentle bit of the boot to stop her moaning. And vidding her lying there with her grudies on show, I wondered should I or not, but that was for later on in the evening. Then we cleaned the till, and there was flip horror show takings that notchy, and we had a few packs of the very best top cancers apiece. Then off we went, my brothers. A real big, heavy, great bastard he was, Dim kept saying. I didn't like the look of Dim. He looked dirty and untidy, like a vet who'd been in a fight, which he had, of course, but you should never look as though you have been. His cravat was like someone had trampled on it. His masky had been pulled off, and he had floor dirt on his lit, so we got him in an alleyway and tidied him up a malenky bit, soaking our tashtuks in spit to cheese the dirt off. The things we did for old Dim. We were back in the Duke of New York, very scorry, and I reckoned by my watch we hadn't been more than 10 minutes away. The starry old babuchkas were still there on the blackened suds, and Scotchmen we'd bought them, and we said, "Hello there, girlies, what's it going to be?" They started on the "Very kind, lads, God bless you, boys," and so we rang the collar and brought a different waiter in this time, and we ordered beers with rum in it, being sore athirst, my brothers, and whatever the old petitzers wanted. Then I said to the old babuchkas, "We haven't been out of here, have we? Been here all the time, haven't we?" They all caught on real scorry and said, "That's right, lads, not been out of our sight, you haven't. God bless you, boys," drinking. Not that it mattered much, really. About half an hour went by before there was any sign of life among the Millicents, and then it was only 2 very young Rossies that came in, very pink under their big copper schlemmies. One said, "You lot know anything about the happenings at Slouse's shop this night?" "Us?" I said, innocent. "Why, what happened?" "Stealing and roughing. 2 hospitalisations. Where have you lot been this evening?" "I don't go for that nasty tone," I said. "I don't care much for these nasty insinuations. A very suspicious nature all this betokeneth, my little brothers." "They've been in here all night, lads," the old sharps started to creech out. "God bless them, there's no better lot of boys living for kindness and generosity. Been here all the time they have. Not seen them move, we haven't." "We're only asking," said the other young Millicent. "We got our job to do like anyone else." But they gave us the nasty warning look before they went out. As they were going out, we handed them a bit of lip music. But myself, I couldn't help a bit of disappointment at things as they were those days. Nothing to fight against, really. Everything as easy as kiss my sherries. Still, the night was still very young. When we got outside of the Duke of New York, we vidded by the main bar's long-lighted window a burbling old pianizza or drunkie, howling away at the filthy songs of his fathers and going blup, blup in between, as though it might be a filthy old orchestra in his stinking rotten guts. One vesture I could never stand was that. I could never stand to see a mooge all filthy and rolling and burping and drunk, whatever his age might be, but more especially when he was real starry like this one was. He was sort of flattened to the wall, and his platies were a disgrace, all creased and untidy and covered in cal and mud and filth and stuff. So we got hold of him and cracked him with a few good horror show tolchocks, but he still went on singing. The song went, "And I will go back to my darling, when you, my darling, are gone." But when Dim fisted him a few times on his filthy drunkard's rot, he shut up singing and started to screech, "Go on, do me in, you bastard cowards! I don't want to live anyway, not in a stinking world like this one." I told Dim to lay off a bit then, because it used to interest me sometimes to slooshy what some of these starry decreps had to say about life and the world. I said, "Oh, and what's stinking about it?" He cried out, "It's a stinking world because it lets the young get onto the old like you done, and there's no law nor order no more." He was screeching out loud and waving his rukas and making real horror show with the slovos, only the odd blurt blurt coming from his kishkas like something was orbiting within, or like some very rude interrupting sort of a mooj making a shoom. So this old Vec kept sort of threatening it with his fists, shouting, "It's no world for any old man any longer, and that means that I'm not one bit scared of you, my boyos, because I'm too drunk to feel the pain if you hit me, and if you kill me, I'll be glad to be dead." We smacked and then grinned, but said nothing, and then he said, "What sort of a world is it at all? Men on the moon and men spinning round the earth like it might be midges round a lamp, and there's not no attention paid to earthly law nor order, not no more. So your worst you may do, you filthy, cowardly hooligans." Then he gave us some lip music, like we'd done to those young militants. And then he started singing again. "Oh, dear, dear land, I fought for thee and brought thee peace and victory." So we cracked into him lovely, grinning all over our litzos, but he still went on singing. Then we tripped him so he laid down flat and heavy, and a bucket load of beer vomit came whooshing out. That was disgusting. So we gave him the boot, one go each, and then it was blood, not song nor vomit, that came out of his filthy old rot. Then we went on our way. It was round by the municipal power plant that we came across Billy Boy and his 5 droogs. Now, in those days, my brothers, the teaming up was mostly by 4s or 5s, these being like auto teams, 4 being a comfy number for an auto, and 6 being the outside limit for gang size. Sometimes gangs would gang up so as to make, like, Malenki armies for big night war, but mostly it was best to roam in these, like, small numbers. Billy Boy was something that made me want to sick just to viddy his fat, grinning litso, and he always had this von of very stale oil that's been used for frying over and over, even when he was dressed in his best platies, like now. They viddied us just as we viddied them, and there was like a very quiet kind of watching each other now. This would be real, this would be proper, this would be the Noj, the Uzi, the Britva, not just fisties and boots. Billy Boy and his droogs stopped what they were doing, which was just getting ready to perform something on a weepy young Devotchka that they had there, not more than 10, she creeching away but with her platies still on, Billy Boy holding her by one ruka, and his number 1, Leo, holding the other. They'd probably just been doing the dirty Slovo part of the act before getting down to a Malenki bit of ultra-violence. When the Viridas are coming, they let go of this boo-hooing little Ptitsa, there being plenty more where she came from, and she ran with her thin white legs flashing through the dark, still going, "Oh, oh, oh!" I said, smiling very wide and droogy, "Well, if it isn't fat, stinking, billy goat, Billy Boy in poison. How art thou, thou globby bottle of cheap, stinking chip oil? Come and get one of the yarbles, if you have any yarbles, you eunuch jelly, thou." And then we started. There were 4 of us to 6 of them, like I have already indicated, but poor old Dim, for all his dimness, was worth 3 of the others in sheer madness and dirty fighting. Dim had a real horror show length of Uzi or chain round his waist, twice wound round, and he unwound this and began to swing it beautifully in the eyes or glasses. Pete and Georgie had good sharp noshes, but I, for my own part, had a fine, starry, horror show, cutthroat Britva, which at that time I could flash and shine artistic. So there we were, dratzing away in the dark, the old Luna with men on it just coming up, the stars stabbing away as it might be knives, anxious to join in the dratzing. With my Britva, I managed to slip right down the front of one of Billy Boy's droog's platies. Very neat, very, very neat, and not even touching the plot under the cloth. Then in the dratzing, this droog of Billy Boy's suddenly found himself all opened up like a pea pod, with his belly bare and his poor old yarbles showing. And then he got very, very razdraz, waving and screaming and losing his guard and letting in old Dim with his chain snaking. Whoosh! So that old Dim chained him right in the glasses, and this droog of Billy Boy's went tottering off and howling his heart out. We were doing very horror show, and soon we had Billy Boy's number one down underfoot, blinded with old Dim's chain and crawling and howling about like an animal. But with one fair boot on the Gulliver, he was out and out and out. Of the four of us, Dim, as usual, came out the worst in point of looks. That is to say, his litzo was all blooded and his platties a dirty mess, but the others of us were still cool and whole. It was stinking fatty Billy Boy I wanted now, and there I was dancing about with my Britva like I might be a barber on board a ship on a very rough sea, trying to get in at him with a few fair slashes on his unclean, oily litzo. Billy Boy had a nodge, a long flick type, but he was a malenky bit too slow and heavy in his movements to have read anyone real bad. And my brothers, it was real satisfaction to me to waltz left 2 3, right 2 3, left 2 3, right 2 3, and carve left cheeky and right cheeky, so that like two curtains of blood seemed to pour out at the same time, one on either side of his fat, filthy, oily snout in the winter starlight. Down this blood poured in like red curtains, but you could viddy Billy Boy felt not a thing, and he went lumbering on like a filthy, fatty bear, poking at me with his nodge. Then we slooshed the sirens and knew the Millicents were coming with pushkas pushing out of the police auto windows at the ready. That little weepy debauchka had told them, no doubt, there being a box for calling the Rosses not too far behind the Muni power plant. Get you soon, fear not, I call, stinking billy goat. I'll have your yarbles off lovely. Then off they ran, slow and panting, except for number one, Leo, snoring on the ground, away north towards the river, and we went the other way. Just round the next turning was an alley, dark and empty and open at both ends, and we rested there, panting fast, then slower, then breathing like normal. It was like resting between the feet of two terrific and very enormous mountains, these being the flat blocks, and in the windows of all the flats you could viddy like blue dancing light. This would be the telly. Tonight was what they called a worldcast, meaning that the same programme was being viddied by everybody in the world that wanted to, that being mostly the middle-aged, middle-class ludies. There would be some big, famous, stupid comic Cheloviek or black singer, and it was all being bounced off the special telly-satellites in outer space, my brothers. We waited, panting, and we could sloosh the sirening Millicents going east, so we knew we were all right now. But poor old Dim kept looking up at the stars and planets and the Luna with his rot wide open like a kid who'd never viddied any such thing before, and he said, "What's on them, I wonder? What would be up there on things like that?" I nudged him hard, saying, "Come, gloopy bastard as thou art, think thou not on them. There'll be life, like down here most likely, with some getting knifed and others doing the knifing. And now, with the notchy still molladoy, let us be on our way, O my brothers." The others smecked at this, but poor old Dim looked at me serious, then up again at the stars and the Luna. So we went on our way down the alley, with the worldcast bluing on either side. What we needed now was an auto. So we turned left coming out of the alley, knowing right away we were in Priestly Place, as soon as we viddied the big bronze statue of some starry poet with an apey upper lip and a pipe stuck in a droopy old rot. Going north, we came to the filthy old filmdrome, peeling and dropping to bits, through nobody going there much, except malchicks like me and my droogs, and then only for a yell or a razrez or a bit of in-out in the dark. We could viddy from the poster on the filmdrome's face, a couple of fly-dirtied spots trained on it, that there was the usual cowboy riot, with the archangels on the side of the U.S. Marshal six-shooting at the rustlers out of L's fighting legions, the kind of hound and horny vesh put out by State Film in those days. The autos parked by the cine weren't all that horror show, crappy, starry vestiges, most of them, but there was a newish Durango 95 that I thought might do. Georgie had one of these polyclefs, as they call them, on his keyring, so we were soon aboard, Dim and Pete at the back, puffing away lordly at their cancers, and I turned on the ignition and started her up, and she grumbled away real horror show, a nice, warm, vibraty feeling grumbling all through your gutty wats. Then I made with an ogre, and we backed out lovely, and nobody viddied us take off.
We fillied round what was called the back town for a bit, scaring old Vex and Chinas that were crossing the roads and zigzagging after cats and that. Then we took the road west.
There wasn't much traffic about, so I kept pushing the old Noga through the floorboards near, and the Durango 95 ate up the road like spaghetti. Soon it was winter trees and dark, my brothers, with a country dark. And at one place I ran over something big with a snarling toothy rot in the headlamps, that it screamed and squelched under, and old Dim at the back near laughed his Gulliver off. Whoa, whoa, whoa at that. Then we saw one young malchick with a sharp, lubby-lubbing under a tree, so we stopped and cheered at them. Then we bashed into them both with a couple of half-hearted tolchocks, making them cry, and on we went. What we were after now was the old surprise visit. That was a real kick and good for smecks and lashings of the ultra-violent. We came at last to a sort of a village, and just outside this village was a small sort of a cottage on its own with a bit of a garden. The Luna was well up now, and we could viddy this cottage fine and clear as I eased up and put the brake on, the other three giggling like Bazumni, and we could viddy the name on the gate of this cottage. Vesch was Home, H-O-M-E, a gloopy sort of a name. I got out of the auto, ordering my droogs to shush their giggles and act like serious, and I opened this Malenki gate and walked up to the front door. I knocked nice and gentle, and nobody came, so I knocked a bit more, and this time I could slooshy somebody coming. Then a bolt drawn, then the door inched open an inch or so, then I could viddy this one Glaz looking out at me, and the door was on a chain. Yes, who is it? It was a Sharp's Golos, a youngish Devotchka by her sound, so I said in a very refined manner of speech, a real gentleman's Golos, "Pardon, madam, most sorry to disturb you, but my friend and me were out for a walk, and my friend has taken bad all of a sudden, with a very troublesome turn, and he is out there on the road, dead out and groaning. Would you have the goodness to let me use your telephone to telephone for an ambulance?" "We haven't a telephone," said this Devotchka. "I'm sorry, but we haven't. You'll have to go somewhere else." From inside this Malenki cottage I could slosh hear the clack, clack, clacky, clack, 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 clackety, clack, clack, clack of some Vec typing away. And then the typing stopped, and there was this Chelovyek's Golos calling, "What is it, dear?" "Well," I said, "could you, of your goodness, please let him have a cup of water? It's like a faint, you see. It seems as though he's passed out in a sort of a fainting fit." The Devotchka sort of hesitated and then said, "Wait." Then she went off, and my three droogs had got out of the auto, quiet, and crept up, horror show, stealthy, putting their muskies on now. Then I put mine on. Then it was only a matter of me putting in the old ruka and undoing the chain, me having softened up this Devotchka with my gent's Golos, so that she hadn't shut the door like she should have done, us being strangers of the night. The four of us then went roaring in, old Dim playing the shoot as usual, with his jumping up and down and singing out dirty Slovos, and it was a nice Malenki cottage, I'll say that. We all went smecking into the room with a light on, and there was this Devotchka sort of cowering, a young pretty bit of a sharp with real horror show groodies on her, and with her was this Chelovyek who was a mooj, youngish too, with horn-rimmed otchkis on him, and on a table was a typewriter and all papers scattered everywhere. But there was one little pile of paper, like that must have been what he'd already typed. So here was another intelligent type, bookman type, like that one we'd filled with some hours back. But this one was a writer, not a reader. Anyway, he said, "What is this? Who are you? How dare you enter my house without permission?" And all the time his Golos was trembling, and his rukas too. So I said, "Never fear. If fear thou hast in thy heart, O brother, pray banish it forthwith." Then Georgie and Pete went out to find the kitchen, while old Dim waited for orders, standing next to me with his rot wide open. "What is this, then?" I said, picking up the pile like of typing from off of the table, and the horn-rimmed mooj said, dithering, "That's just what I want to know. What is this? What do you want? Get out at once before I throw you out." So poor old Dim, masked like P.B. Shelley, had a good loud smack at that, roaring like some animal. "It's a book," I said. "It's a book what you are writing." I made the old Golos very coarse. "I have always had the strongest admiration for them as can write books." Then I looked at its top sheet, and there was the name, A Clockwork Orange, and I said, "That's a fair gloopy title. Who ever heard of a Clockwork Orange?"
Then I read a Malenki bit out loud in a sort of very high-type preaching golos. The attempt to impose upon man a creature of growth and capable of sweetness, to ooze juicily at the last round the bearded lips of God, to attempt to impose, I say, laws and conditions appropriate to a mechanical creation, against this I raise my sword pen. Dim made the old lip music at that, and I had to smack myself. Then I started to tear up the sheets and scatter the bits over the floor, and this writer Mooj went sort of bazoomny and made for me with his zoobies clenched and showing yellow and his nails ready for me like claws. So that was old Dim's cue, and he went grinning and going and ah for this vexed dithering rot. Crack, crack, first left fisty, then right, so that our dear old Droog, the red vino on tap, and the same in all places, like it's put out by the same big firm, started to pour and to spot the nice clean carpet and the bits of his boot that I was still ripping away at. Raz. All this time, this Devotchka, his loving and faithful wife, just stood like froze by the fireplace, and then she started letting out little Malenki creatures, like in time to the like music of old Dim's fisty work. Then Georgie and Pete came in from the kitchen, both munching away, though with their maskies on. You could do that with them on and no trouble. Georgie with like a cold leg of something in one rooker, and half a loaf of Kleb with a big dollop of Maslow on it in the other, and Pete with a bottle of beer frothing its Gulliver off, and a horror show rooker full of like plum cake. And they went ho ho ho, Viddy and old Dim dancing round and fisting the writer Vec, so that the writer Vec started to platch like his life's work was ruined, going boo hoo hoo with a very square bloody rot, but it was ho 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 in a muffled eater's way, and you could see bits of what they were eating. I didn't like that, it being dirty and slobbery, so I said, drop that mounch, I gave no permission, grab hold of this Vec here so he can video all and not get away. So they put down their fatty picture on the table among all the flying paper, and they clopped over to the writer Vec, whose horn-rimmed otchkes were cracked but still hanging on, with old Dim still dancing around and making ornaments shake on the mantelpiece. I swept them all off then, and they couldn't shake no more, little brothers, while he filled with the author of A Clockwork Orange, making his lids all purple and dripping away like some very special sort of a juicy fruit. All right, Dim, I said, now for the other vesh. Bog, help us all. So he did the strong man of the Devotchka, who was still creaking away in a very horror show 4 in a bar, locking her rookers from the back, while I ripped away at this and that and the others going oh still, and real good horror show groodies they were, that they then exhibited their pink glasses, oh my brothers, while I untrussed and got ready for the plunge. Plunging, I could slooshy cries of agony, and this writer bleeding Vec that Georgie and Pete held on to nearly got loose, howling bazoomny with the filthiest of slovos that I already knew and others he was making up. Then after me it was right old Dim should have his turn, which he did in a beastly, snorty, howly sort of a way, with his PB shelly masky, taking no notice, while I held on to her. Then there was a changeover, Dim and me grabbing the slobbering writer Vec, who was past struggling really, only just coming out with slack slort of slovos like he was in the land in a Milk Plus bar. And Pete and Georgie had theirs. Then there was like quiet, and we were full of like hate, so smashed what was left to be smashed. Typewriter, lamp, chairs, and Dim, it was typical of old Dim, watered the fire out and was going to dung on the carpet, there being plenty of paper. But I said no. Out! 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 I howled. The writer Vec and his Gina were not really there, bloody and torn and making noises, but they'd live. So we got into the waiting auto, and I left it to Georgie to take the wheel, me feeling that Malenki bit shagged, and we went back to town, running over odd squealing things on the way. The next morning, I woke up at 0800 hours, my brothers, and as I still felt shagged and fagged and fashed and bashed, and my glasses were stuck together real horror show with sleep glue, I thought I would not go to school. I thought I would have a Malenki bit longer in the bed, an hour or two, say, and then get dressed nice and easy, perhaps even having a bit of a splosh about in the bath, make toast for myself and sloosh the radio or read the Gazette, all on my oddinocky. And then in the after lunch I might perhaps, if I still felt like it, itty off to the old scollywall and see what was vereating in that great seat of gloopy, useless learning, oh my brothers. I heard my papa grumbling and trampling and then itting off to the dye works where he rabbited, And then my mum called in a very respectful goloss, as she did now. I was growing up big and strong. "It's gone 8, son. You don't want to be late again." So I called back, "A bit of a pain in my gulliver. Leave us be, and I'll try to slip it off, and then I'll be right as Dodgers for this after." I sluiced her, give a sort of a sigh, and she said, "I'll put your breakfast in the oven then, son. I've got to be off myself now." Which was true, there being this law for everybody, not a child, nor with child, nor ill, to go out rabbiting. My mum worked at one of the state marts, as they call them, filling up the shelves with tin soup and beans and all that cal. So I sluiced her, clank a plate in the gas oven like, and then she was putting her shoes on and then getting her coat from behind the door and then sighing again. Then she said, "I'm off now, son." But I let on to be back in sleepland, and then I did doze off real horror show. And I had a queer and very real-like sneety, dreaming for some reason of my droog Georgie. In this sneety, he'd got like very much older and very sharp and hard and was gover-eating about discipline and obedience and how all the malchicks under his control had to jump hard at it and throw up the old salute like being in the army. And there was me in line like the rest saying, "Yes, sir, no, sir." And then I vidded clear that Georgie had these stars on his pletchos and he was like a general. Then he brought in old Dim with a whip, and Dim was a lot more starry and grey and had a few zoobies missing, as you could see when he let out a smeck viddying me. And then my droog Georgie said, pointing like at me, "That man has filth and cal all over his platters." And it was true. Then I creaked, "Don't it, please don't, brothers, don't it," and started to run. And I was running in like circles, and Dim was after me, smacking his Gulliver off, cracking with the old whip, and each time I got a real horror show tall chop with this whip. There was like a very loud electric bell, ring, 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 ringing, and this bell was like a sort of a pain, too. Then I woke up real scorry, my heart going bap, 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 bap. And of course there was really a bell going brr, brr, and it was our front door bell. I let on that nobody was at home, but this brr, brr still itted on, and then I heard a goloss shouting through the door, "Come on then, get out of it, I know you're in bed." I recognised the goloss right away. It was the goloss of P.R. Deltoid, a real gloopy nas, that one. What they called my post-corrective advisor, an overworked vec with hundreds on his books. I shouted, "Right, right, right," in a goloss of like pain, and I got out of bed and attired myself, my brothers, in a very lovely overgown of like silk, with designs of like great cities all over this overgown. Then I put my noggers into very comfy woolly touples, combed my luscious glory, and was ready for P.R. Deltoid. When I opened up, he came shambling in looking shagged, a battered old schlapper on his Gulliver, his raincoat filthy. "Ah, Alex, boy," he said to me, "I met your mother, yes. She said something about a pain somewhere, hence not at school, yes?" "A rather intolerable pain in the head, brother, sir," I said in my gentleman's goloss. "I think it should clear by this afternoon." "Or certainly by this evening, yes," said P.R. Deltoid. "The evening is the great time, isn't it, Alex, boy?" "Sit," he said, "sit, sit," as though this was his domy and me his guest. And he sat in this starry rocking chair of my dad's and began rocking as if that was all he'd come for. So I said, "A cup of the old chai, sir, tea, I mean." "No time," he said, and he rocked, giving me the old glint under frowning brows, as if with all the time in the world. "No time, yes," he said, gloopy. So I put the kettle on. Then I said, "To what do I owe the extreme pleasure? Is anything wrong, sir?" "Wrong?" he said, very scorry and sly, sort of hunched, looking at me, but still rocking away. Then he caught sight of an advert in the Gazette, which was on the table. A lovely, smecking young petitza with her grudies hanging out, to advertise, my brothers, the glories of the Jugoslav beaches. Then after sort of eating her up in 2 swallows, he said, "Why should you think in terms of there being anything wrong? Have you been doing something you shouldn't, yes?" "Just a manner of speech," I said, "sir." "Well," said P.R. Deltoid, "it's just a manner of speech from me to you that you watch out, little Alex, because next time, as you very well know, it's not going to be the corrective school any more. Next time it's going to be the Bari place, and all my work ruined. If you have no consideration for your horrible self, you at least might have some for me, who have sweated over you. A big black mark, I tell you in confidence, for every one we don't reclaim. A confession of failure for every one of you that ends up in the stripy hole." "I've been doing nothing I shouldn't, sir," I said. The militants have nothing on me, brother, sir, I mean." Cut out this clever talk about Millicents, said P.R. Deltoid, very weary but still rocking. Just because the police have not picked you up lately doesn't, as you very well know, mean you've not been up to some nastiness. There was a bit of a fight last night, wasn't there? There was a bit of shuffling with nozzes and bike chains and the like. One of a certain fat boy's friends was ambulanced off late from near the power plant and hospitalised, cut about very unpleasantly, yes. Your name was mentioned. The word has got through to me by the usual channels. Certain friends of yours were named also. There seems to have been a fair amount of assorted nastiness last night. Oh, nobody can prove anything about anybody as usual. But I'm warning you, little Alex, being a good friend to you as always, the one man in this sore and sick community who wants to save you from yourself. I appreciate all that, sir, I said, very sincerely. Yes, you do, don't you? He sort of sneered. Just watch it, that's all, yes. We know more than you think, little Alex. Then he said in a goloss of great suffering, but still rocking away, what gets into you all? We study the problem, and we've been studying it for damn well near a century, yes, but we get no farther with our studies. You've got a good home here, good loving parents, you've got not too bad of a brain. Is it some devil that crawls inside you? Nobody's got anything on me, sir, I said. I've been out of the rookas of the Millicents for a long time now. That's just what worries me, sighed P.R. Deltoid. A bit too long of a time to be healthy. You're about due now, by my reckoning. That's why I'm warning you, little Alex, to keep your handsome young proboscis out of the dirt, yes. Do I make myself clear? As an unmuddied lake, sir, I said. Clear as an azure sky of deepest summer. You can rely on me, sir. And I gave him a nice zooby smile. But when he'd ukadited and I was making this very strong pot of chai, I grinned to myself over this vesh that P.R. Deltoid and his droogs worried about. All right, I do bad, what with crusting and toll chocks and calves with a Britva and the old in-out. And if I get lavetted, well, too bad for me or my little brothers. And you can't run a country with every Chelovyak comporting himself in my manner of the night. So if I get lavetted, and it's 3 months in this mesto and another 6 in that, and then, as P.R. Deltoid so kindly warns, next time, in spite of the great tenderness of my Summers brothers, it's the great unearthly zoo itself, well, I say, fair, but a pity, my lords, because I just cannot bear to be shut in. My endeavour shall be in such future as stretches out its snowy and lily-white arms to me before the nodge overtakes or the blood spatters its final chorus in twisted metal and smashed glass on the high road, to not get lavetted again, which is fair speeching. But, brothers, this biting of their toenails over what is the cause of badness is what turns me into a fine laughing malchick. They don't go into what is the cause of goodness, so why have the other shop? If ludies are good, that's because they like it, and I wouldn't ever interfere with their pleasures, and so of the other shop, and I was patronising the other shop. More, badness is of the self, the one, the you or me on our oddie knockies, and that self is made by old Bog or God and is his great pride and rodosty. But the not self cannot have the bad, meaning they of the government and the judges and the schools cannot allow the bad because they cannot allow the self. And is not our modern history, my brothers, the story of brave Malenki selves fighting these big machines? I am serious with you, brothers, over this, but what I do because I like to do. So now, this smiling winter morning, I drink this very strong chai with moloko and spoon after spoon after spoon of sugar, me having a sladky tooth, and I dragged out of the oven the breakfast my poor old mum had cooked for me. It was an egg fried, that and no more. But I made toast and ate egg and toast and jam, smacking away at it while I read the Gazetta. The Gazetta was the usual about ultra-violence and bank robberies and strikes and footballers making everybody paralytic with fright by threatening to not play next Saturday if they did not get higher wages, naughty malchickywicks as they were. Also, there were more space trips and bigger stereo TV screens and offers of free packets of soap flakes in exchange for the labels on soup tins. Amazing offer for 1 week only, which made me smeck. And there was a Bolshevik article on modern youth, meaning me. So I gave the old bow, grinning like Bazumny, by some very clever Bolchelovyak. I read this with care, my brothers, slurping away at the old chai, cup after tass after chasha, crunching my lumticks of black toast dipped in jammy wham and eggy wig. This learned vex said the usual vestiges about no parental discipline, as he called it, and the shortage of real horror show teachers who would lambast bloody beggary out of their innocent poops and make them go boo-hoo-hoo for mercy. All this was gloopy and made me smeck, but it was like nice to go on knowing one was making the news all the time, oh my brothers. Every day there was something about modern youth, but the best vesture they ever had in the old Gazette was by some starry pop in a doggy collar, who said that in his considered opinion, and he was gover-eating as a man of bog, it was the devil that was abroad, and was like ferreting his way into light young innocent flesh. And it was the adult world that could take the responsibility for this with their wars and bombs and nonsense. So that was all right. So he knew what he talked of, being a god-man. So we young innocent malchicks could take no blame. Right. When I'd gone a couple of razzies on my full innocent stomach, I started to get out day platties from my wardrobe, turning the radio on. There was music playing, a very nice Malenki string quartet, my brothers, by Claudius Birdman, one that I knew well. I had to have a smack, though, thinking of what I'd vidded once in one of these articles on modern youth, about how modern youth would be better off if a lively appreciation of the arts could be encouraged. Great music, it said, and great poetry would quieten modern youth down and make modern youth more civilized. Civilized, my civilized yarbles. Music always sort of sharpened me up, my brothers, and made me feel like old Bog himself, ready to make with the old Donner and Blitzen and have Vex and Petitzes creeching away in my ha-ha-ha power. And when I'd cheested up my litzo and rookas a bit and done dressing, my day platties were like student wear, the old blue pantalones with sweater with A for Alex. I thought here at last was time to itty off to the disc boutique, and Cotter too, my pockets being full of pretty Polly, to see about this long-promised and long-ordered stereo Beethoven No. 9, the choral symphony, that is, recorded on masterstroke by the Esch Sham Symphonia under El Mohaiwir. So out I went, brothers. The day was very different from the night. The night belonged to me and my droogs and all the rest of the nadsats, and the starry bourgeois lurked indoors drinking in the gloopy whirlcasts. But the day was for the starry ones, and there always seemed to be more Rosies or Millicents about during the day too. I got the autobus from the corner and rode to centre, and then I walked back to Taylor Place, and there was the disc boutique I favoured with my inestimable customer, my brothers. It had the gloopy name of Melodia, but it was a real horror show mesto, and scorry most times at getting the new recordings. I walked in, and the only other customers were two young petitzas sucking away at ice sticks, and this mark was Dead Cold Winter, and sort of shuffling through the new pop discs, Johnny Burnaway, Stash Crow, The Mixers, Lay Quiet a While with Ed and Id Molotov, and all the rest of that cal. These two petitzas couldn't have been more than 10, and they too, like me, it seemed, evidently, had decided to take the morning off from the old scollywall. They saw themselves, you could see, as real grown-up devotchkas already. What with the old hip swing when they saw your faithful narrator brothers, and padded groodies and red all plushed on their goobers. I went up to the counter, making with a polite zooby smile at old Andy behind it. Always polite himself, always helpful, a real horror show type of a Vec, though bald and very, very thin. He said, "Aha, I know what you want, I think. Good news, it has arrived." And with big conductor's rookas beating time, he went to get it. The two young petitzas started giggling, as they will at that age, and I gave them a cold glassy. Andy was back real scorry, waving the great shiny white sleeve of the 9th, which had on it, brothers, the frowning, beetled, thunder-bolted litzo of Ludwig van himself. "Here," said Andy, "shall we give it the trial spin?" But I wanted it back home on my stereo to slooshy on my oddie-knocky, greedy as hell. I fumbled out the deng to pay, and one of the little petitzas said, "What you gettin', Bretty? What biggie? What only?" These young devotchkas had their own way of gover-eating. "They haven't 17? Luke Stern? Goggly-gogol?" And both giggled, rocking and hippie. Then an idea hit me and made me near fall over with the anguish and ecstasy of it all, my brothers, so I could not breathe for near 10 seconds. I recovered and made with my new clean zoobies and said, "What you got back home, little sisters, to play your fuzzy warbles on?" Because I could viddy the discs they were buying with these teeny pop vestures. "I bet you got little, save tiny, portable picnic spinners." And they sort of pushed their lower lips out at that. "Come with Uncle," I said, "and hear all proper. Hear angel trumpets and devil trombones. You are invited." And I bowed. They giggled again, and one said, "Oh, but we're so hungry. Oh, we could so eat." The other said, "Yeah, she can say that, can't she just?" So I said, "Eat with Uncle. Name your place." Then they viddied themselves as real sophistos, which was pathetic, and started talking in big lady golosses about the Ritz and the Bristol and the Hilton and Il Ristorante Gran Turco. But I stopped that with, "Follow, Uncle," and I led them to the pasta parlour just round the corner and let them fill their innocent young litzos on spaghetti and sausages and cream puffs and banana splits and hot choc sauce till I near sicked with the sight of it. I, brothers, lunching but frugally off a cold ham slice and a growling dollop of chilli. These two young petitzas were much alike, though not sisters. They had the same ideas, or lack of, and the same colour hair, alike dyed straw. Well, they would grow up real today. Today I would make a day of it. No school this after lunch, but education certain. Alex as teacher. Their names, they said, were Marty and Sonietta. Bazumny enough, and in the height of their childish fashion. So I said, "Righty right, Marty and Sonietta, time for the big spin. Come." When we were outside on the cold street, they thought they would not go by autobus. Oh, no, but by taxi. So I gave them the humour, though with a real horror show ingrin, and I called a taxi from the rank near centre. The driver, starry, whiskery Vec in very stained platties, said, "No tearing up now, no nonsense with them seats, just reupholstered they are." I quieted his gloopy fears, and off we spun to Municipal Flat Block 18A, these two bold little petitzas giggling and whispering. So, to cut all short, we arrived, oh my brothers, and I led the way up to 10-8, and they panted and smacked away the way up, and then they were thirsty, they said, so I unlocked the treasure chest in my room and gave these 10-year young devotchkas a real horror show Scotchman apiece, though well filled with sneezy pins and needles soda. They sat on my bed, yet unmade, and legs swung, smacking and peating their highballs, while I spun there like pathetic Malenki discs through my stereo, like peating some sweet-scented kid's drink that was in like very beautiful and lovely and costly gold goblets. But they went, "Oh, oh, oh," and said swoony and hilly, and other weird slovos that were the height of fashion in that youth group. While I spun this cal for them, I encouraged them to drink and have another, and they were nothing loath, oh my brothers. So by the time their pathetic pop discs had been twice spun each, there were two, Honey Nose, sung by Ike Yard, and Night After Day After Night, moaned by two horrible yarbleless like eunuchs whose names I forget. They were getting near the pitch of like young Petitz's hysterics, what with jumping all over my bed and me in the room with them. What was actually done that afternoon, there is no need to describe, brothers, as you may easily guess all. Those two were unplatted and smacking fit to crack in no time at all, and they thought it the bolshiest fun to video old Uncle Alex standing there all nagoy and panhandled, squirting the hypodermic like some bear doctor, then giving myself the old jab of growling jungle cat secretion in the ruka. Then I pulled the lovely ninth out of its sleeve, so that Ludwig van was now nagoy too, and I set the needle hissing onto the last movement, which was all bliss. There it was then, the bass strings like gobber eating away from under my bed at the rest of the orchestra, and then the male human golos coming in and telling them all to be joyful, and then the lovely blissful tune about all joy being a glorious spark like of heaven, and then I felt the old tigers leap in me, and then I leapt onto these two young petitzas. This time they thought nothing fun, and stopped creeching with high mirth, and had to submit to the strange and weird desires of Alexander the Large, which, what with the ninth and the hypo jab, were chudesny and zamachat, and very demanding, oh my brothers. But they were both very, very drunken, and could hardly feel very much. When the last movement had gone round for the second time, with all the banging and creeching about joy, 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 then these two young petitzas were not acting the big ladies' sophisto no more. They were like waking up to what was being done to their Malenki persons, and saying that they wanted to go home, and like I was like a wild beast. They looked like they had been in some big bitva, as indeed they had, and were all bruised and pouty. Well, if they would not go to school, they must still have their education. And education they had had. They were creeching and going, ow, 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 as they put their platties on, and they were like punching at me with their teeny fists, as I lay there, dirty and nagoy and fair shagged and fagged on the bed. This young Sonietta was creeching, beast and hateful animal, filthy horror. So I let them get their things together and get out, which they did, talking about how the Rosses should be got onto me and all that cal. Then they were going down the stairs, and I dropped off to sleep, still with the old joy, 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 crashing and howling away.